All right, let's talk about one of the most fascinating, and let's be honest, one of the most famously difficult books ever written, the Book of Revelation. It's the grand finale of the Bible, and for centuries it's had people both captivated and, well, completely confused. So how do we even begin to wrap our heads around it?
You know, if you've ever cracked open Revelation and felt your eyes glaze over at the visions of strange beasts, cryptic numbers, and epic cosmic warfare, trust me, you are not alone. It's packed with so much dense symbolism and prophetic language that it can feel like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But what if I told you there's a way to make sense of it all? One scholar, Edwin Reynolds, makes the case that while Revelation might seem like a locked book, he actually provides 10 specific keys to help us open it. So for this explainer, we're going to grab those keys and see if we can unlock this thing together. Okay, let's get started with the foundational keys. You can think of these as the basic blueprint for the whole book. You know, what it is, why it was written, and how it's all put together. Getting this part right is absolutely crucial for understanding everything else.
So key number 1 is all about its genre. Revelation isn't just any old prophecy. It belongs to a very specific category called apocalyptic. That word actually comes from the Greek apokalypsis, which means an unveiling or a revealing. This style of writing is designed to pull back the curtain and show us hidden truths about the big picture, God's ultimate plan, and that cosmic tug-of-war between good and evil.
And that leads us right into key number 2, the book's dual purpose. On the one hand, the very first verse tells us its explicit goal, to show God's people what must soon take place. It's about the future. But woven into every chapter is a deeper, implicit purpose, to be a source of encouragement, to inspire faithfulness and endurance. It's really a message of hope for people who are going through some incredibly tough times.
Key 3 is the structure. Now, scholars might debate the little details, but there's a pretty clear 3-part structure most agree on. The first part, chapters 1 to 11, is mostly historical, kind of covering the timeline from the author's own day forward. Then the last part, chapters 15 to 22, is what we call eschatological. That's just a fancy word for things related to the end times. And then, sandwiched right in the middle, you get this mind-blowing vision of the Great Controversy, which is the cosmic battle at the very heart of the story. Okay, so let's move on to the next set of keys. We've got the blueprint, so now we can look at the core concepts, the really big ideas that drive the entire narrative. You gotta have these on your radar to follow along.
And this is a huge one. Key number 4. The book's roots are planted deep in the Old Testament. What's wild is that Revelation doesn't have a single direct quote from the Old Testament, but it is absolutely saturated with references to its language, its themes, its symbols. To really get Revelation, you have to realize it's having a constant conversation with all the scriptures that came before it.
Building right on that is key number 5, which is all about the book's unity. Yeah, it's complex, but think of it like a single giant puzzle that helps interpret itself. You might find a really confusing image in one chapter, like the beast from the abyss in chapter 11, but then it gets explained in much more detail later on in chapter 17. The book itself often holds the keys to its own symbols.
This idea of stark contrast is front and center for key number 6, ethical dualism. I mean, in Revelation, there is really no middle ground. Everything is presented in these opposing pairs. You've got the pure woman versus the great harlot, the lamb versus the dragon, the holy city of New Jerusalem versus the corrupt city of Babylon. This massive struggle, this great controversy, it defines the entire moral world of the book.
And key 7 gets to the heart of why it was written, its core theology. What are the big questions Revelation is wrestling with? Well, it's all about God's ultimate power and authority, the fairness of his justice, the idea that salvation comes through Christ, who's often called the Lamb, and this really urgent personal call for every single person to make a choice.
All right, now for the part that can be the most challenging for a lot of us, the symbols. You know, the beasts, the numbers, all the strange figures. How in the world are we supposed to interpret them? Well, these next few keys are going to give us a practical toolkit for navigating the symbolic landscape of Revelation.
Let's start with key number 9, which is numerology, by focusing on some of the most famous symbols in the book. And there is one number that shows up over and over and over again, 7. You've got 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. The fact that it's repeated so much is a massive clue.
And it's not random. These numbers carry symbolic weight that's rooted in Scripture. The number 7 almost always represents some kind of completeness or perfection. And the number 12, think of the 12 tribes of Israel or the 12 apostles, is pretty consistently seen as the number for God's kingdom or his people. Recognizing these patterns is a game changer.
Of course, this all leads to the million-dollar question, right? With all this imagery flying around, numbers, beasts, cosmic events, how do we know when to take something literally and when is it supposed to be symbolic? This brings us to a really crucial rule of thumb that Reynolds suggests. As a general guide, scenes that take place up in heaven are often presented as being literal, while the way they apply to events down here on Earth is often symbolic or spiritual. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it is an incredibly helpful starting point for making sense of the visions.
But to really get that principle, we need some context. And that brings us to key number 8, which is a massive piece of the whole puzzle: the sanctuary. The entire book is framed with the imagery of the heavenly temple. We constantly see references to the altar, the Ark of the Covenant, priests, rituals, and at the absolute center of it all is Christ, portrayed as the sacrificial lamb. His work is what gives the whole sanctuary framework its meaning.
And that brings us to our final section and what our source calls the most important key of them all. This is the one that really puts all the other 9 keys into perspective and unlocks the book's true purpose.
And here it is, key number 10. I mean, listen to how Edwin Reynolds puts it. The whole point of reading Revelation isn't just to decode some prophetic timeline or solve a complicated puzzle. At its very core, it is a personal message from Christ. And if you miss that, you've missed the entire point of the book.
So what is that message? It's a call to action. This book wasn't written to just sit on a shelf like a history textbook. It's meant to spiritually prepare people for what's coming. It constantly calls out to the reader, to you, to make a choice, to stay faithful, and to find hope right now, in the present, based on the ultimate victory that it promises for the future.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If we stop approaching Revelation as just a confusing code we need to crack, and instead see it as a personal message of encouragement and hope, well, how might that change the way we read it? What new meaning might we find, not just for the distant future, but for our own lives, right here, today?